The year is 1945. The world stands at a pivotal moment in history as the ashes of World War II settle across Europe and beyond. The war, which had engulfed nations and continents, has finally come to an end, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a yearning for peace. World War II, a conflict that ravaged nations and claimed millions of lives, has finally drawn to a close. Cities lay in ruins, economies are shattered, and countless families mourn the loss of loved ones. The world is eager to rebuild and heal, but the end of one conflict marks the beginning of another. The defeat of Nazi Germany brought about not peace, but a new global struggle, the Cold War. This period of geopolitical tension between the Soviet Union and the United States would shape the second half of the 20th century, influencing international relations, military strategies, and even daily life for millions. This ideological clash pitted the capitalist West, led by the United States, against the communist East, spearheaded by the Soviet Union. The two superpowers, each with their own vision for the future, engaged in a battle for influence and control that spanned the globe. Germany, its landscape scarred by war, found itself at the epicenter of this new conflict. The country, once a symbol of Nazi aggression, now became a focal point for the ideological struggle between East and West. The fate of Germany would be a barometer for the broader Cold War tensions. The country was divided, split between the Allied powers. The Western Allies, the United States, Britain and France, controlled the western part of Germany, while the Soviet Union took control of the eastern part. This division was meant to be temporary, but it soon became a permanent fixture of the Cold War landscape. Berlin, the former capital of the Third Reich, mirrored the division of the nation. The city, located deep within the Soviet-controlled zone, was also divided into sectors controlled by the US, Britain and France. This unique situation made Berlin a flashpoint for Cold War tensions. Despite being situated deep within the Soviet-controlled zone, Berlin was also divided into sectors controlled by the US, Britain and France. This arrangement, initially a matter of administrative convenience, quickly transformed into a potent symbol of the Cold War divide. This division, initially a matter of administrative convenience, quickly transformed into a potent symbol of the Cold War divide. The city became a microcosm of the larger ideological battle, with each side seeking to showcase the superiority of its system. The capitalist West and the communist East eyed each other with suspicion, their ideological differences deepening the chasm between them. Propaganda, espionage and political maneuvering became the tools of this new conflict, as both sides sought to gain the upper hand. Berlin, a city cleaved in two, became a microcosm of a world teetering on the precipice of a new conflict. The Berlin Wall, erected in 1961, became the most visible and poignant symbol of this division, separating families, friends and neighbors. The years that followed saw the Cold War intensify. The superpowers engaged in a series of confrontations and proxy wars, from the Korean Peninsula to the jungles of Vietnam, each seeking to expand their influence and contain the other. The Soviets imposed their communist system on East Germany, while West Germany, aided by the Marshall Plan, began its journey towards economic recovery and integration with the West. This stark contrast in fortunes fueled resentment and unrest in the East, leading many to seek a better life in the West. This stark contrast in fortunes fueled resentment and unrest in the East, leading many to seek a better life in the West. The flow of refugees from East to West became a significant issue as the East German government struggled to maintain control and prevent the loss of its citizens. By 1961, an estimated 2.5 million East Germans had fled to the West, draining the East German workforce and embarrassing the communist regime. The construction of the Berlin Wall was a desperate attempt to stem this tide and assert control over the population. Something had to be done. The Berlin Wall, with its barbed wire, watchtowers and armed guards, became a stark reminder of the division that defined the Cold War era. It stood as a testament to the lengths to which the East German government would go to maintain its grip on power and prevent the exodus of its people. In the dead of night, on August 13, 1961, a sinister project began in Berlin. The city, already a focal point of Cold War tensions, was about to be physically divided in a way that would leave an indelible mark on history. As the world slept, East German soldiers and construction workers moved with a chilling efficiency, laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most infamous structures of the 20th century. Under the cover of darkness, East German troops and construction workers moved with chilling efficiency. They worked tirelessly, driven by orders from the highest echelons of the Soviet regime. The initial task was to lay down barbed wire, a temporary measure that would soon be replaced by something far more formidable. The urgency and secrecy of the operation underscored the gravity of what was unfolding. Barbed wire fences, hastily erected, began to snake their way through the heart of the city, physically separating east from west. These makeshift barriers were the first tangible signs of a new reality for Berliners. Families, friends and neighbors found themselves suddenly and brutally divided. The barbed wire was a harbinger of the concrete and steel that would soon follow, creating a more permanent and oppressive division. What began as a crude barrier would, in the coming days, transform into one of the most potent symbols of oppression in human history, the Berlin Wall. The initial barbed wire was soon replaced by concrete slabs and guard towers, creating a formidable obstacle that would stand for nearly 3 decades. The wall was not just a physical barrier, it was a psychological one, representing the ideological divide between communism and capitalism. The construction of the wall sent shockwaves around the world. International newspapers carried headlines that captured the global outrage and disbelief. The wall quickly became a focal point of Cold War tensions, symbolizing the stark divide between the Eastern Bloc and the Western world. It was a bold and aggressive move by the Soviet Union, one that would have far-reaching consequences for international relations. What was initially dismissed by some in the West as a mere publicity stunt by the Soviets quickly revealed itself to be a brutally effective means of control. Western politicians were caught off guard, and the people of West Berlin could only watch in horror as the wall took shape. The initial disbelief gave way to a grim acceptance of the new reality. The wall was here to stay, and it would profoundly impact the lives of those living in its shadow. The wall, in its stark brutality, served as a physical manifestation of what Winston Churchill had famously dubbed the Iron Curtain, the ideological barrier that separated the communist East from the capitalist West. Churchill's words had been prophetic, and the Berlin Wall was the grim realization of his warning. It was a tangible representation of the ideological struggle that defined the Cold War era. The wall was more than just concrete, barbed wire and guard towers. It was a symbol of repression, a monument to the fear and paranoia that gripped the Soviet bloc. The East German government, with the backing of the Soviet Union, used the wall to control its population, to prevent the flow of ideas and people to the West. It was a tool of oppression, designed to keep people in and the outside world out. It was a symbol of the repression, a monument to the fear and paranoia that gripped the Soviet bloc. Propaganda posters adorned the wall, extolling the virtues of the communist regime and vilifying the West. Eastern Bloc soldiers patrolled the wall, ever vigilant, ever ready to enforce the strict border controls. The wall was a constant reminder of the oppressive regime that ruled the East. Families were torn apart, their homes on one side, their loved ones on the other. The wall cut through the very fabric of society, creating a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. People waved to their loved ones across the wall, their gestures a poignant reminder of the human cost of this brutal division. The wall was not just a political statement, it was a personal tragedy for countless individuals. The wall became a stark reminder of the human cost of the Cold War, a symbol of a world divided. Graffiti began to appear on the wall, a form of silent protest against the division it represented. Berliners observed the construction with a mix of fear, anger and resignation. The wall was a daily reminder of the geopolitical struggle that had turned their city into a front line of the Cold War. Life in the shadow of the wall was one of constant surveillance and fear. East Berliners lived under the watchful eyes of the state, their every move monitored by surveillance cameras and informants. The wall was not just a physical barrier, it was a psychological one, creating an atmosphere of distrust and paranoia. The East German government used the wall to maintain its grip on power, to control its population through fear. East German border guards, heavily armed and with orders to shoot to kill, patrolled the death strip, the no-man's land that ran alongside the wall. This strip was a deadly barrier designed to prevent any attempts to escape to the west. The guards were a constant presence, a reminder of the deadly consequences of defying the regime. The death strip was a stark symbol of the lengths to which the East German government would go to maintain control. Escape attempts, often daring and ingenious, were met with brutal force. Many tried to find a way over, under, or through the wall, risking their lives for a chance at freedom. Some succeeded, but many more were captured or killed. Memorials for those who tried to escape stand as a testament to their bravery and the high cost of seeking freedom. The wall was a deadly obstacle, a barrier that claimed many lives. The wall, it seemed, was an insurmountable obstacle, a concrete testament to the seemingly unbridgeable divide between East and West. It stretched through the city, a stark and unyielding barrier that seemed to defy any hope of reconciliation. The watchtowers and barbed wire were a constant reminder of the oppressive regime that had built it. The Berlin Wall stood as a symbol of the Cold War, a physical manifestation of the ideological divide that defined an era. The Berlin Wall may have presented an image of impenetrability, but behind the facade of communist control, discontent simmered. The wall, a stark and oppressive symbol of division, stood tall and foreboding, casting a long shadow over the lives of East Germans. It was not just a physical barrier, but a psychological one, representing the iron grip of the communist regime over its people. The wall's presence was a constant reminder of the freedoms that lay just out of reach on the other side in West Berlin. Life in East Germany, despite the government's propaganda, was a far cry from the socialist paradise promised by the communist regime. The reality was starkly different. The marketplaces often had empty shelves, a testament to the economic hardships faced by the citizens. The streets of East Berlin bore the signs of poverty and neglect, a far cry from the vibrant and prosperous West Berlin. Propaganda posters plastered on walls tried to paint a rosy picture, but the truth was evident to all who lived there. Economic stagnation, political repression, and a pervasive atmosphere of fear fueled a burning desire for freedom and opportunity, aspirations symbolized by the glittering capitalist West just beyond the wall. East Germans would often gaze longingly through barbed wire, dreaming of a life filled with possibilities. The stark contrast between the two Berlins was a daily reminder of what they were missing. Families would gather around their televisions, catching glimpses of the West, their faces reflecting a mix of hope and despair. The 1980s witnessed this discontent begin to boil over. The streets of East Germany started to fill with voices of dissent. Citizens gathered in public squares, their numbers growing with each passing day. The youth in particular were vocal in their demands for change, refusing to accept the status quo. The air was thick with a sense of urgency and a desire for a better future. Inspired by the solidarity movement in Poland and the calls for glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, by Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, East Germans grew bolder in their demands for change. The winds of change blowing through Eastern Europe gave them hope. They saw the possibility of a different future, one where they could speak freely and live without fear. Banners calling for freedom became a common sight, and the spirit of rebellion was palpable. Protests, once small and quickly silenced, began to gain momentum. What started as isolated acts of defiance grew into a powerful movement. The police presence, meant to intimidate, only served to strengthen the resolve of the protesters. Peaceful demonstrations became a regular occurrence, with citizens from all walks of life joining in. The march for change was unstoppable, and the authorities found it increasingly difficult to suppress the growing tide of dissent. The seeds of rebellion, sown in the fertile ground of discontent, were beginning to sprout. Conversations in cafes turned to politics, and graffiti on the Berlin Wall boldly called for freedom. Secret meetings among dissidents became more frequent as they planned their next moves. The sense of solidarity among the citizens was growing, and the dream of a free and united Germany was becoming more tangible with each passing day. The world watched with bated breath as events in Eastern Europe unfolded. International journalists flocked to East Germany, capturing the unfolding drama. Western television broadcasts brought the events into living rooms around the globe, and global leaders held urgent discussions about the future of Eastern Europe. The eyes of the world were on East Germany, and the pressure on the communist regime was mounting. The seemingly unshakable grip of Soviet power began to weaken. and with it the future of the Berlin Wall, that potent symbol of division, hung in the balance. Cracks began to appear, both literally and metaphorically, in the wall that had stood for so long. The withdrawal of Soviet tanks from Eastern Europe signaled a shift in power, and East German citizens could sense that change was imminent. Celebrations near the wall became more frequent, as hope began to replace fear. The year 1989 would prove to be a pivotal year, a year that would change the course of history. Crowds gathered at the Berlin Wall, their excitement palpable. Citizens began to chip away at the wall, each piece that fell symbolizing a step towards freedom. The scenes of celebration in Berlin as the wall fell were a testament to the indomitable spirit of the people. The seeds of discontent had blossomed into a full-fledged revolution, and the world would never be the same again.